A routine traffic stop takes a dark turn when a racist officer disrespects an elderly black woman without knowing who she really is. The air is thick with tension as bystanders pull out their phones. What starts as an abuse of power ends with a single line that flips the entire balance. And within minutes, the walls begin to crack. "You people don't get warnings. You get tickets." The words sliced through the morning air like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Officer Kellen Burke's voice was loud enough to draw a few glances from passing drivers. His hand rested on the grip of his belt, not quite on the gun, but close enough to signal authority. His uniform was crisp, his sunglasses mirrored, and his arrogance radiated through the street like heat off asphalt. The woman he'd pulled over sat quietly behind the wheel of a silver Buick. She was maybe in her late 60s. Hair perfectly set, glasses perched low on her nose, hands resting politely on the wheel. A folded umbrella leaned on the passenger seat beside her, and tucked into the center console, a leather-bound notebook with golden edges. "I wasn't speeding," she said softly. "You were going 42 in a 35. You people always say you weren't speeding." Burke scoffed as he leaned closer. "License and registration." She didn't argue. She didn't flinch, just reached into her handbag and handed over her ID. Kellen grabbed it without looking. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he tossed it onto the hood of the car. It slid an inch, stopped and sat there, exposed, disrespected. From the sidewalk, a teenage girl in a school hoodie froze mid-step, pulling out her phone. Burke was still talking. "You know what your problem is?" he said. "You people walk around like you got rights nobody gave you. Well, let me teach you something." And then it happened. He reached in through the window and slapped the woman across her cheek. Not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to silence the street, hard enough that even the wind seemed to stop. Gasps echoed from nearby. The woman didn't scream, didn't cry. She blinked slowly, turned her face back toward him. And then, quietly, with absolute calm, she opened her mouth. "You just slapped a sitting judge." Burke froze. "What did you say?" he snapped. "I said," she repeated, "you just laid your hands on a federal judge." A small crowd had started to gather now, phones out, faces wide with disbelief. Burke tried to wave it off. "Yeah, right." She reached forward, slowly, opened the glove compartment, pulled out a folded paper. A seal glinted under the sunlight. "Federal Court of Appeals." She held it up. "Judge Miriam Easton, sworn in May 17th, nominated by the President of the United States." Burke started, mouth slightly open, and for the first time that morning he said nothing. From the crowd, someone whispered, "Oh my God, Judge." Easton didn't move. Her voice didn't rise. She simply looked at him and added one final line. "You have 4 minutes before this entire block changes." And she was right. Exactly 4 minutes later, a sleek black SUV with federal plates turned the corner. Then another. Sirens, silent but flashing, rolled up behind Burke's cruiser. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. One held a phone to his ear. The other walked straight toward Burke. "Officer Kellen Burke," the agent said. "You're coming with us." Burke raised his hands, confused, sputtering. "This is insane." "Tell it to the judge," the man said, tilting his head toward Easton, and she, still seated, was looking out the window, not at Burke, but at the people watching. The ones who'd seen everything, the ones still filming. The SUV doors opened for her. She stepped out with dignity, dusted her sleeve, and nodded once to the girl with the phone. That video. It was already on 3 platforms. The caption read, "Racist cop slaps elderly woman. Turns out she's the judge." It hit 100,000 views in 20 minutes, and the empire of silence had just begun to shake. City Hall smelled like panic. Not the kind of panic that screamed or slammed doors. No, this was the quieter kind. Tense footsteps, muted whispers, phones vibrating non-stop. The kind of panic that knew something was coming, but didn't know where it would land first. Mayor. Enoch Hayes stood by the window of his office, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The morning light painted long shadows across the mahogany floor. 2 million views, his aide whispered. That was 15 minutes ago. Hayes didn't respond. Sir, I heard you. Another notification popped on the flat screen. Behind them, slap the judge, trending Zur 1. Across the room, Police Commissioner Darnell Voss paced in tight circles. He looked like a man trying to put out fires with his shoes. We can't suspend him until we know more, he argued. It could be, she's a federal judge. Hayes cut in sharply. There's no more. That was more. Voss threw his hands up. How the hell were we supposed to know? She wasn't even dressed like a judge. Hayes turned slowly. What does a judge dress like, Darnell? Silence. The tension between them hung heavy. She wasn't on the calendar, Voss mumbled. No court session, no courthouse, just driving, regular car, no flags, no plates. No crime, Hayes said. No threat. And he slapped her. He didn't know. He shouldn't have to know. That's the whole damn point. Voss sighed, rubbing his temple. We can try to offer a statement. Something procedural. Policy misstep. Training lapse. Hayes raised a brow. A training lapse made him say, "You people?" Silence again. On the screen, a new video clip loaded. A slow-motion edit. Music underneath. The slap. Her face turned. Her calm words. You just slapped. A sitting judge. It played like a trailer to a courtroom thriller, except this was real, an unfolding in front of the entire country. She's not just any judge, Hayes said quietly now, as if remembering something. Her appointment, it wasn't just routine. What do you mean? She was vetted by the Civil Liberties Committee. She was a special selection, first black woman to serve in that federal circuit. And she's got a history. A kind that makes enemies. Voss stiffened. What kind of history? The kind that writes opinions on institutional bias, the kind that's ruled against half this city's departments, the kind that scared them. Across town, Judge Miriam Easton sat in her living room, curtains drawn, phone off, news playing faintly in the background, not for information, but for tone. She watched with distant eyes, her hands wrapped around a warm mug. Her son, David, sat beside her, lawyer, former military, calm like his mother, except his calm always came with a weight behind it, like a fuse that hadn't been lit. Yet, they're panicking, he said. You know what they'll do next? She didn't reply. They'll try to find dirt, anything, parking violations, donations, ex-husband interviews. Watch. Still no reply. David leaned forward, elbows on knees. Do you want to go public? She finally looked at him. No, she said. I want them to. He tilted his head. I want them to speak first, she clarified. Let them defend the indefensible. Let them build a tower of lies. Then we bring the storm. David sat back impressed. You're playing chess. I'm playing history. Back at City Hall, Hayes stared out at the skyline again. The city buzzed below, unaware of the quiet meeting happening in his office. Call legal, he said. I want to know every ruling she's written in the last 5 years. Everyone. Why? Because she's not going to hit back with a press conference. He turned around slowly. She's going to use the law. The conference room on the 9th floor of the municipal building was never this full, not at 7 a.m., not with this much sweat behind suits and nerves behind silence. A long table sat in the center, surrounded by legal advisors, political handlers, 2 deputy commissioners, and 3 city attorneys. At the head sat Mayor Hayes, sleeves rolled up, tired eyes scanning a printed file thick as a phone book. Across from him, Assistant District Attorney Rachel Quinn flipped through her own binder, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. She's ruled against us a lot, she murmured. How many cases? Hayes asked, not looking up. Quinn flipped again. Directly? 18. Indirectly cases where her precedents were cited? Over 60. Commissioner Voss leaned forward. Define ruled against. Quinn pulled a page out and placed it flat on the table. She's blocked excessive use of force justifications in 6 major cases. She threw out unlawful search warrants tied to gang raids in Southside, ordered the release of 3 wrongfully imprisoned black men in 2019, one of whom filed a lawsuit that cost the city $4.6 million. Someone whistled low. Hayes rubbed his temples. "Why didn't I know any of this?" "You did," Quinn said flatly. "You just didn't read the memos." Across the city, Judge Miriam Easton stood in her modest kitchen buttering toast. She wore a thick robe, hair tied back, movements unhurried. She was calm not because nothing was happening, but because everything was happening exactly as expected. She'd seen this moment coming years ago. With every decision, every opinion she signed that tugged at the stitches of the system, she knew it would snap back one day. Now it has. She looked out the window. A pigeon landed on her balcony, fluffed its feathers and watched her through the glass. She smirked slightly, then turned to her breakfast. Back in the war room, another city lawyer spoke up. She was offered a retirement package last year. Everyone turned. "Wait, what?" Hayes asked. "It was informal, through back channels. They tried to ease her out, quietly, told her she was too controversial and that her rulings were causing friction. She declined." "Of course she did," Voss cursed under his breath. "She's been a landmine this whole time, and Burke just stomped on her with steel boots." Rachel Quinn kept flipping. She also wrote a guest opinion piece in The Atlantic 2 years ago, called it "The Subtle Tyranny of Acceptable Racism," name-dropped our city by example. Hayes stood suddenly. Everyone froze. "She's building something," he said slowly. "This wasn't about the slap. That was just the spark. She's been preparing to burn this whole thing down." "Sir, respectfully," Voss said, "we need to issue a statement. Today." "No," Hayes snapped. "No more statements. No more 'we're reviewing the footage.' That woman is a damn iceberg. We've been laughing at what's above water while the rest of her is tearing through our hull." Quinn closed her binder. "She's already won public opinion," she said. "Every channel, every feed, hashtags, commentaries, even white liberals, on calling it unforgivable. You know what that means, right?" "Yeah," Hayes said bitterly. "It means they're scared too." Meanwhile, across town, Miriam placed her dishes in the sink, dried her hands, and walked to a quiet room filled with books and papers. She sat at her desk, typed 2 words on a blank document: "Judicial Memoir." Underneath, she began a new line. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and sealed with the insignia of the United States District Court. The return address bore no name, only the judge's chambers and a federal barcode. The recipient? Senator Aida Langston, Chair, Judiciary Oversight Committee, Washington, D.C. It arrived at precisely 10:32 a.m. The intern who opened it blinked twice before realizing it wasn't just another budget report. She walked it to Senator Langston's desk herself. Inside were 14 pages. No legal jargon, no courtroom language, just plain, unflinching truth. The kind you don't read out loud without your hands shaking. It began simply, "Dear Senator Langston, I no longer write this as a judge. I write this as a black woman who has spent 32 years watching the machinery of law protect everyone but the vulnerable." Each paragraph was a scalpel, slicing through silence, exposing. Rutard Easton named names, not just Officer Burke, but the culture that created him, training manuals that encouraged dominance displays in black neighborhoods, internal memos instructing officers to write furtive movement, even when body cam footage showed none. And then she included attachments, redacted case files, suppressed complaints, audit trails. One document showed an internal affairs report from 5 years ago that labeled Burke as temperamental under pressure with questionable control. Yet he was promoted twice. Another showed emails between high-ranking officials, referencing problematic judges and suggesting early retirement nudges to keep things quiet. The final page carried her signature: Judge Miriam Easton, United States Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit, Ret dash. At the bottom, if the system won't expose itself, I will. By noon, Senator Langston had read the letter 3 times. She cancelled all appointments. By 2 p.m., her chief of staff had forwarded copies to the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division. By 4:15 p.m., an anonymous source had leaked the entire letter to ProPublica. By 5:30 p.m., it was viral. Mayor Hayes stared at the screen in disbelief. He didn't move as the news anchor read the letter's opening lines, word for word, her voice trembling. Voss sat across from him, pale. It's over. Hayes didn't blink. No, he said coldly, it's just starting. He stood, walked to the window and looked out over the city, as if he could see the cracks forming beneath the streets. We underestimated her. And thought she was another protest judge with a fancy robe. She is a protest, Voss muttered, but the kind that writes its own constitution. In a quiet coffee shop, college students huddled around phones. A father sat at the counter, reading the printed letter with wide eyes. A group of retired veterans folded the paper and nodded slowly, and in her living room, Miriam Easton turned the TV off. She didn't need to watch the flames. She'd already lit the match. In a cabin tucked deep in the Appalachians, a man named Elijah Rourke sat in a wooden chair, boots crossed at the ankles, sipping coffee brewed black and bitter. He hadn't turned on a news channel in years, didn't care much for noise. But that morning, something told him to power up the old satellite dish. He flipped through static until he found the feed, and there she was. Miriam Easton, reading a letter that shook the pillars of justice from D.C. to downtown. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You didn't fold, he muttered. He remembered her. Sharp mind, straight spine, a quiet fury beneath every calm ruling. She had saved him once, not with a gun, not with fists, but with 10 pages of cold, precise truth that proved he'd been framed by his own bureau. They'd tried to bury it. She dug it up. Now someone had slapped her, in public, on camera, and the city dared to act surprised. He stood slowly, joints stiff but solid, grabbed the old metal case from beneath the floorboards. Inside, not weapons, files, names, footage, copies of things never supposed to be copied. He picked up the phone, one number memorized. Rachel Quinn, the city attorney, answered. Still, answering your own line, kid, he asked. She froze. Elijah, your city's in trouble. Your people don't know how deep this runs, but I do. Elijah, what? I'm coming in. You tell Easton she has backup from the shadows. Then he hung up. In City Hall, chaos was quietly evolving into paranoia. Voss had called for a lockdown on all internal police communication systems. Devices were being confiscated, emails scrubbed. Every officer who had ever been reprimanded under Easton's rulings was being reviewed. Hayes knew what this was. Desperation, and it smelled like fear. This is bad, Rachel Quinn said as she rushed into his office. Worse than we thought. Hayes didn't look up. The letter? No. Rourke. He looked at her now. Elijah Rourke just called me. He's coming to the city. Hayes's eyes went wide. Rourke? I thought he disappeared. He didn't disappear. He was erased. They both stood in heavy silence. Rourke's name wasn't thrown around lightly. He'd been one of the FBI's top internal affairs agents before his own unit accused him of tampering with evidence during an investigation into racist task force practices. He would have gone down if Easton hadn't stepped in with a judicial order demanding the release of sealed tapes. She'd saved him. Now he was returning the favor. At the precinct, Officer Burke sat in a quiet, windowless room. No cuffs, no uniform. Just sweat rolling down the side of his face as 2 federal agents reviewed footage without saying a word. One of them finally spoke. You know who she was? He didn't answer. The second agent turned to him slowly. Do you know what happens when you slap a federal judge on video with 2 prior complaints already in your file? Still no response. They dropped a folder on the table. Inside, a timeline of his misconduct. None of it public yet. "You think this is about you?" one agent said. "It's not. It's about everyone who protected you." And with that, they left the room. Meanwhile, in a small federal building on the edge of the city, Easton met Rachel Quinn in private. No reporters, no cameras, just two women and a thick folder. "Rourke's back," Rachel said. Easton's face didn't change. "Good. He says he has footage, paper trails, everything they burned." "I'm sure he does." Rachel sat across from her. "This could go nuclear, Miriam." Easton finally looked at her. "That's the plan." Rachel sighed, voice quieter now. "Are you prepared for what that means?" "I am. And the fallout." "I'm not doing this for revenge, Rachel. I'm doing it because we've let too many things rot in silence. That slap wasn't the beginning. It was the final crack." She leaned back, eyes distant. "They've forgotten what real accountability looks like. I'm going to remind them." Late that night, as the city tried to sleep through its shame, a black SUV pulled into a garage beneath a safe house. Elijah Rourke stepped out with 2 cases and a map of the city marked in red ink. He looked at Rachel. "They don't know it yet," he said, "but everything's about to burn." The safe house looked like nothing from the outside. Just another dull grey building tucked between a shuttered laundromat and a pawn shop that hadn't changed its neon sign since 1998. But inside, beneath the flickering security lights, the war room had come alive. Maps, files, photocopies of court documents, photos with red circles and strings. It didn't look like a lawyer's office. It looked like something out of an intelligence bunker. Judge Easton stepped into the room, hands clasped behind her back. "You never could do anything quietly," she said. Elijah Rourke turned from the board and grinned. "And you never could leave anything broken." They didn't shake hands, didn't hug. They didn't need to. The weight of history hung between them, forged in the silence of past battles. "You brought the tapes?" she asked. Rourke nodded, reaching into a steel case. He placed a drive on the table. "These," he said, "are the original unredacted bodycam archives from Operation Iron Sweep. You remember that name?" She did. It had been a massive crime. Suppression task force deployed in the city's south side. Dozens arrested. Evidence mysteriously vanished. Most walked, but 2 had died in custody. The city called it an unfortunate anomaly. Easton had called it what it was: orchestrated brutality. "They sealed this," she said, eyeing the drive. "They thought they did," Rourke replied. "But I kept copies, originals, witness logs, internal complaints. One officer even confessed off record, all buried. And now we exhume the truth." He walked to the board, tapping on several names. Task force leaders, training. Officers, assistant DAs who signed off on raids. These people didn't just look away, they coordinated it. Easton pulled out a yellow notepad. "We're not charging them yet. We don't start with arrests." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "We don't? No. We start with something bigger. We file a federal systemic corruption motion, one that accuses the city not just of abuse, but of running an intentional architecture of racial control." Rourke gave a low whistle. "You want to indict the city itself?" She nodded. "Not one man. The culture, the silence, the cover-ups, the idea that some lives are just paperwork." For the next 2 hours, they built. They compiled testimony from whistleblowers Easton had quietly protected over the years. Judges, clerks, even a former forensics tech who had falsified DNA logs under departmental pressure. They structured the motion like a grenade, clean, legal, and devastating. It began with Burke's slap, then unfolded backward, exposing how that moment was never an isolated act, but a symptom of a larger disease. Easton would submit it to the federal court under a special provision, Emergency Institutional Integrity Review, meant for corrupt municipalities. It would not only expose, It would trigger mandatory federal oversight. No press conferences, no dramatic announcements, just a filing. Quiet and lethal. Meanwhile, across town, Mayor Hayes received a copy of a leaked memo from a friend at the DOJ when he saw the heading. Preliminary Notice of Oversight Inquiry, Municipal Conduct. He dropped the paper. "This is a coup," he whispered. "No, sir," his aide replied. "This is a reckoning." The next morning, Rachel Quinn stood in the lobby of the Eastern District Courthouse. She held the thick folder in her hand, and for a second she hesitated. "This is going to set the place on fire," she whispered. Then she walked to the clerk's desk and submitted the motion. As she handed it over, the clerk looked at the cover page. Her eyes widened. "You're filing this?" Rachel nodded. The clerk looked up. God help them. That night, Elijah and Easton sat across from each other, sipping coffee like old comrades. "You know what they'll try to do next, right?" he asked. "Discredit me. They'll go after your past. Let them. I've never hidden from it." He leaned forward. "You really think this motion will work?" She met his gaze without blinking. "It's not about the motion. It's about the moment." The motion went public at 6:03 a.m. It started with a court clerk's whisper to a cousin who worked at a blog. The blog posted it, not expecting more than 100 clicks. By 6:17 a.m., it had crossed 50,000 views. By 6:40 a.m., every major media outlet in the country had broken into coverage. The motion's title alone was enough to set off alarms. Eastern vs. City of Anbridge. Motion to investigate systemic racialized law enforcement structures and judicial complicity. Under federal oversight, journalists read it aloud like prophecy. By 7 a.m., it was being discussed on every morning show. By 7:45, it was the lead story on CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox. And by 8:15, Miriam Easton's photo was on the front page of the New York Times, above the headline, "Judge Declares War on Her Own City." In the courthouse elevator, Rachel Quinn stood, silently as reporters crowded near the entrance, their voices buzzing like hornets. Why now? Is this a revenge play? Does the judge have political ambitions? But Rachel said nothing. When the doors opened, she walked through the flashing lights like a soldier through gunfire. Across town, Mayor Hayes watched it all unfold with dead eyes. The TV played behind him, the anchor's voice sharp. "This motion does not simply accuse. Officer Burke. It names command chains. It references decades of patterns. It lists 19 sealed cases and includes 47 names." Hayes turned it off. "Get me Voss," he barked. Voss sat across from him 10 minutes later, face flushed, tie askew. "They have everything," he said breathlessly. "Old training memos, internal reports, even testimony from that damn tech, who vanished 2 years ago." Hayes slammed his palm on the desk. "Why is her motion airtight? How?" Voss rubbed his temple. "Because she built it like a judge, not a protester." Hayes leaned in, voice low. "We don't just need to discredit her. We need to dismantle her." Voss blinked. "You're not serious." "I am. We leak personal files, divorce records, anything. We pay someone to whisper old rumors, find something questionable, get ahead of the narrative. You want a smear campaign. I want her silenced." Voss swallowed hard. "And what if she can't be silenced?" Hayes's eyes went cold. "Then we remind her how much she can lose." At the same time, Judge Easton sat quietly in her living room, dressed in a plain grey sweater, sipping tea. The world was burning. With her name. But she hadn't given a single interview. "Everyone's asking where you are," David said, pacing behind her. "They want a soundbite, something to control the damage." "Let them want," she said calmly. "If I speak, now it'll become about my voice, not the motion, not the truth." "You really believe the system can fix itself?" "No, I believe it can be cornered into doing so." There was a knock at the door. Rourke entered with a manila envelope. His face was tense. "You've got enemies moving," he said. Easton raised an eyebrow. "Surveillance," he said. "2 plainclothes unmarked cars. They're watching this house." Federal? No, local. David stiffened. So it's begun. Easton stood, walked to the window and looked at the street. Let them watch, she said. They'll learn what justice looks like when it doesn't blink. By afternoon, a surprise statement appeared online. It came from a former federal prosecutor, LaToya Sanders, who had worked under Easton during her early days. She tweeted, I saw Miriam Easton fight cases nobody would touch. I saw her risk her position, her life, her legacy, for black boys, shot without cause. If you think she's doing this for revenge, you've never met her. She's doing it because she knows how to make the system hurt itself. The post went viral. Within hours, other voices joined in. A former public defender, a mother whose son had been freed due to Easton's ruling, even a retired white judge who admitted she once feared Easton in court, not because she was loud, but because she was always right. But not everyone was clapping. A deep-voiced man appeared on a late-night news segment. An ethics specialist funded by a conservative think tank. She's endangering public trust in law enforcement, he growled. This is a coordinated attack on stability. What do you say to the evidence in her filing? The host asked. He waved it off. Documents don't mean intent. This is emotionalism pretending to be justice. And in the city's darker corners, real meetings were taking place, in boardrooms, in basements, in police unions and political lobbies. The word her was spat with venom. The word target hung in the air like smoke. That night, Easton wrote quietly at her desk, a line for the next chapter in her memoir. When the system looked in the mirror, it saw me, and hated what it saw. The message arrived without a signature, in the form of a folded note slipped under Easton's chamber door at exactly 6:42 a.m. The handwriting was neat, practiced, judicial. Every letter looked like it belonged on a ruling. 3 words, meet me tonight. A second line followed, old library. After close, alone. She didn't need to ask who sent it. There was only one judge in Ambridge who dared to communicate like that, Justice Peter Langford. Long ago, he'd been her vocal critic, a constitutional purist, believed in order over outcome, voted opposite her on almost every circuit decision. But he wasn't a coward, and that mattered now. That evening the library loomed in darkness, its stained glass windows dimmed by dust. And decades. Easton entered through the side, her coat drawn close against the cold. The security lights inside hummed faintly, casting pale halos across the old law books. Langford was already there. Standing at the far end of the central aisle, hands clasped behind his back, like he was about to deliver a ruling. The silence between them stretched long and dense. I figured you'd ignore the note, he said. I almost did. You've got the whole city rattled. Not the whole city, just the ones with something to lose. Langford turned toward her, his face thinner than she remembered, eyes sharper, wiser. I read the motion, he said, twice. And? You missed something. Easton tensed slightly. Go on. Langford walked to the nearest desk and placed a small folder on it. You made it about structures, patterns, the cultural cancer behind the uniforms. That's powerful. But if you really want to gut this empire, you need to target its lifeline. She narrowed her eyes. Which is? Money. He flipped open the folder. Inside were detailed financial records. Audit trails from private security contracts, military-grade gear acquisitions, and surveillance tech programs disguised as urban safety initiatives. These contracts go through shell vendors, he said, city-run firms with no public transparency. They launder funding into programs that funnel directly back into campaign accounts. Easton leaned in. Her pulse picked up. You're saying the same people who protect rogue cops are profiting off them. Exactly. They want chaos. They bill it, package it, sell it as a necessity. They treat over-policing like business inventory. Langford met her gaze. If you expose this, Your motion won't just shake institutions. It'll collapse the financial scaffolding holding them together. Easton slowly closed the folder. Why are you giving me this? Langford looked away for a moment. Because I used to think justice was about restraint, but now I see restraint without courage is just complicity. You're fighting the real war. I'm just trying to help the right side win for once. She said nothing for a moment, then nodded. This changes everything. The next morning, Rourke stared at the new intel, his jaw tight. Corporate. Money laundering through policing, he muttered. That's not a scandal. That's treason with a tax ID. Rachel Quinn looked sick. If this gets out, it will get out, Easton said. She opened a new document titled Addendum Fiscal Corruption Index, Ambridge Municipal Entities. This time, she wasn't just indicting a department. She was naming banks, investors, big donors. Meanwhile, across town, Mayor Hayes sat at a round table with 3 key donors and one very silent corporate liaison. She's getting too close, the man in the black suit said. Hayes didn't respond. She found the financials, the ghost contracts. Still, Hayes didn't move. You need to understand something, the man continued. This isn't about a judge anymore. This is about a system that funds half the politicians in this state. Hayes's voice was barely audible. What do you want me to do? End her, legally, publicly, ruin her credibility, fabricate if needed, just make her disappear from the narrative. Hayes stared at the table, hands trembling. Back at the safe house, Rourke loaded files onto a drive. We will release this tomorrow, he said. No more waiting, but Easton raised a hand. Not yet. What? I need to speak in court. Open session. One final statement. Before the nation. Before the law. If they're going to try and bury me, let them see my face when they do it. Rourke hesitated, then nodded. Are you sure you're ready? Easton's voice was steady. I've been ready since the first time they told me I didn't belong. In a courtroom. That night, Easton wrote in her journal, they built a kingdom out of silence and called it order. I brought a voice. And they heard thunder. Courtroom 7C was standing room only, marble columns, oak benches, and 3 walls lined with press. Camera crews jostled for position. Even the bailiff seemed nervous. The air held that rare electric silence before something historic. Miriam Easton stepped to the center, with calm in her step and fire in her spine. She wasn't wearing a robe today. Just a black suit, elegant, sharp, without distraction, her hair pulled back, face unpainted, eyes steady. Across from her, city attorneys sat stiff and watchful. Hayes wasn't there, neither was Voss. But a lawyer she didn't recognize sat in their place, a clean-cut corporate type, too polished for the public sector. He was a signal. The game had changed. As the court called to order, Judge Trammell presided from the bench. Neutral, unreadable. You may proceed, he said. Easton stepped forward, eyes moving across the faces, citizens, students, reporters, lawyers, clerks, all of them waiting for the judge who had slapped the system back to speak. She opened her, or folder, then paused. No speech, she said softly, just truth. She pulled a sheet from the folder and handed it to the bailiff. He brought it to Judge Trammell. It's a supplemental filing, addendum to the motion, including financial evidence, procurement contracts, and whistleblower statements related to the city's internal corruption apparatus. Gasps rippled through the gallery. She continued, For 3 decades, I served this city believing the law could self-correct, that if we ruled fairly, justice would evolve. But justice doesn't evolve unless it's forced to. The system doesn't bleed unless someone cuts it deep enough. She paused. I didn't come here to destroy the city. I came here to end what's been rotting inside it. People began nodding in the crowd. One reporter mouthed, Damn! Then it happened. A man in a cheap suit rushed in through the side door, whispered in the city attorney's ear, and handed him a phone. The attorney's face lit up, like he'd just seen the kill shot land. He stood. Your Honor, he said quickly. Before this court proceeds, the city would like to submit urgent new information regarding Judge Easton's fitness to present this motion. Easton didn't flinch. Trammell raised a brow. Go on. The man tapped his phone. A large screen behind the courtroom blinked to life. A voice played. He was only 17. She sentenced him like he was a monster. The video cut to an old courtroom photograph, a young black man in cuffs, crying. Then the voice returned, older now. Trembling. She gave me 20 years. Said it was mercy. I lost my youth. My parents died while I was locked up. And now she wants to talk about justice. The screen froze on a younger Easton, presiding from the bench, her mouth in a hard line. The city attorney spoke. This young man's conviction was signed by Judge Easton herself in 2003. He was exonerated in 2021. DNA evidence proved his innocence. She never apologized. The room erupted, people stood, reporters shouted, cameras flashed. Easton stood silently as the city attorney turned to the crowd. She claims to fight for justice, but even she got it wrong. And when she did, she moved. On like it didn't matter. The trap had been set. The crowd's energy shifted. Doubt rippled, whispers grew sharp. Judge Trammell banged his gavel. Order, order! Easton didn't move. Finally, she raised a hand. Let it play, she said. What? Trammell asked. There's more to that clip. Let it finish. The attorney hesitated. Play it, Trammell ordered. The screen flickered back to life. The same man's voice returned, softer now. But she also came to the prison. 2 years before I was exonerated, she told me she'd found new evidence. That she was fighting to reopen the case, even when no one else cared. Pause. She saved my life. Yeah, she gave me 20 years, but she was also the reason I got a second chance, because she kept looking, even when it meant proving herself wrong. The final line hit hard. She's not perfect, she's honest. And in this city, that's the rarest kind of power. Silence swept the room. The city attorney sat down, face flushed. The air had flipped again. Easton finally spoke. I have ruled wrongly. I have sentenced men later proven innocent. That stain doesn't go away. She took a breath. But what I've never done is let silence protect me. I fought for his freedom before anyone else did, because if we can't admit our own sins, we don't belong in courtrooms. The gallery burst into quiet applause. Judge Trammell leaned forward. Motion will proceed. Addendum accepted. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown to hundreds. Live streams blared. Chants began to rise. Truth has a face. Her name is Easton. That night, Hayes stood in his office watching footage of the courtroom. He picked up the phone. She survived it, he said. The voice on the other end replied coldly. Then we escalate. Hayes's jaw tightened. I want her legacy shattered. Burned to ash. You have the files. We have more than files. A pause. We have family. The smear dropped at midnight. A sudden flood of headlines hit every major site simultaneously. Not subtle. Not cautious, brutal. Judge Easton's son tied to cover-up in military raid. David Easton's war record under scrutiny. Mother seeks justice, son hides truth. The timing was surgical, just hours after Miriam's courtroom statement, had shifted the momentum in her favor. Someone wanted to gut her credibility at the root, and they aimed to do it through blood. David sat in his apartment, watching the news spiral. His military portrait was now a centerpiece on every channel. His service in a classified conflict in North Africa had become public fodder. They weren't just twisting facts, they were manufacturing them. Rachel Quinn called in a panic. David, you need to respond immediately. Deny everything, threaten legal action, do something. But David didn't sound rattled. No. What? I'm not denying it. Are you serious? I'm addressing it head on. No press team, no spin, just me. The next morning, David Easton walked up the courthouse steps alone, in a plain navy blue suit. No entourage, no lawyer. Cameras swarmed, reporters screamed. He paused at the top, turned toward the crowd and raised his hand for silence. Then he spoke. directly, clearly, without notes. I served my country with honor. In 2011, I was part of a military operation that ended with the death of 3 civilians. At the time, it was called collateral damage, but for me, it was failure. Reporters leaned forward. The moment had gone quiet. I submitted a classified report, requested internal review. My own commanding officer shut it down. They buried it, but I didn't forget. He pulled a file from his jacket, held it high. This is my copy of the report, declassified this morning under FOIA request. Redacted but honest. It shows what I saw, what I tried to fix. He stepped forward, handed it to the press pool. I'm not a perfect man, but I'm my mother's son, and in our house, we don't lie to survive, we stand to fix. The clip of that speech went viral within an hour. No podium, no PR, just a man owning truth. The hashtags flipped instantly. Easton's son truth is hereditary, your bloodline of justice. In City Hall, Hayes watched the clip in stunned silence. He turned to the man in the black suit, the corporate fixer. You said he'd... Crack, Hayes muttered. The man shrugged. He didn't. Hayes slammed the desk. Then find someone who will. Meanwhile, in a quiet cafe near the courthouse, 2 elderly veterans sat watching David's clip on a phone. One of them wiped his eye. About damn time someone owned it. At the safe house, Miriam watched in silence as her son's video replayed. For the 3rd time. He handled it better than I would have, Rourke said with a smirk. Miriam didn't reply. She was still, poised, but her eyes shimmered, just slightly. David entered minutes later. They didn't say much. They didn't need. She stood, walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm proud of you, she whispered. He nodded. You taught me how. Later that night, an emergency board meeting was held inside the city's ethics committee. The smear had backfired. Public support for the Eastons was climbing. Donations for Easton's legal team were surging. Law students were volunteering pro bono. It was becoming a movement. One councilman muttered bitterly, She's not a judge anymore. She's a symbol now. And symbols, they're much harder to silence. Courtroom 1A was a fortress of tension. The crowd outside the courthouse wrapped around the block. Security was doubled. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Inside, every seat was taken. Clerks squeezed in at the back. Law students perched on stairs. Even former judges came to watch, because this wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. Miriam Easton walked to the front of the courtroom, flanked by Rachel Quinn and Elijah Rourke. Her face unreadable, not cold, focused. A warrior walking into her final battlefield, Judge Trammell adjusted his glasses from the bench. This session will proceed under the format submitted by Ms. Easton's legal team. Testimonials first, then followed by the supplemental exhibit submitted yesterday. A murmur went through the crowd. Cameras clicked. A court artist tried to keep up. Rachel stepped forward. Your Honor, our first speaker is DeAndre Miles. DeAndre walked up with quiet strength. Dressed in a simple grey hoodie and black slacks, he looked younger than his age, but there was pain in his eyes that couldn't be hidden. I was 17 when I was arrested, he began, voice steady. I was charged with possession with intent to distribute. I had no drugs on me, no money, no scale, just a backpack, empty. He looked straight ahead. The officer said I reached into my waistband. I was reaching for my phone, but the system believed him. I was sentenced to 3 years. He held up a yellow file. She found this, he said, nodding to Easton. Torn pages, missing timestamps, a redacted dashcam report. She reopened. She got it overturned, he paused, swallowing hard. She gave me back the rest of my life. The next was Marcia Klein, small in stature, trembling, but fierce beneath the grief. My son James was 14, she said, gripping the podium. He was watching cartoons when the SWAT team hit our house. They were looking for someone else. They said wrong address. They shot him in the back when he tried to run. In his home. Gasps echoed across the room, a few sniffles. I never saw anyone charged. I never got a report. Until she found it. Buried in a misfiled folder. Marcia looked at Easton. You gave me truth. I've waited 9 years just to... Say his name in court. Thank you. One by one they came forward. Luis Ortega, a mechanic pulled from his car, held at gunpoint for having a suspicious look. Fatima Nasri, a university student labeled a potential agitator during peaceful protest and flagged in a database used by local precincts to track future risks. Sandra Lee, a public school teacher wrongly accused of resisting arrest after breaking up a fight outside her school, footage suppressed until Easton found it in a mislabeled drive. Each testimony was a hammer. Each voice cracked the courtroom walls wider. Some lawyers in the crowd took notes. Others just looked away. By the 10th testimony, even Judge Trammell looked shaken. Then the room shifted. The doors opened quietly, and Peter Langford walked in. Rachel's eyes widened. He's not on our list. Rourke's jaw tightened. What the hell is he doing? Easton didn't blink. Her eyes followed Langford as he approached the stand, uninvited, unapologetic. I request the floor as a senior judicial peer and contributor to this motion, Langford said coolly. Trammell hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, Langford stood, tall, clearing his throat. I came here as someone who once respected Judge Easton's integrity. I believed in her cause. I even shared files with her. But today, I question her direction. Silence, murmurs, disbelief. Easton's fingers curled slightly. Langford continued. We are no longer discussing reform. We are witnessing vengeance. The testimonies you've heard are tragic, but no city survives when its institutions are dismantled. Wholesale, he gestured toward Easton. She is asking you not just to fix what's broken, but to destroy everything that holds our civil structure together. He looked at Trammell. I respectfully request the court pause these proceedings until the motion can be reviewed by an independent federal counsel. The room broke into gasps. Reporters began typing furiously. Rachel stood, furious. Your Honor, this is off procedure. He is not counsel. He is... Easton gently touched her arm. Let him finish. Langford turned to her. You're becoming what you once warned us about, too powerful to question. He stepped off the stand, and just like that, walked out of the courtroom. The betrayal hit like a gut punch. Even Trammell looked conflicted now. He adjusted his robe, cleared his throat, then announced, the motion will remain under review. This court is adjourned until further notice. The gavel hit, session over. Back in the war room, silence reigned. Rachel paced. They got to him. Someone leaned hard, probably financial blackmail, career leverage, hell, maybe threats. Rourke leaned on the table. We shouldn't have trusted him. David looked at his mother. Are you okay? Miriam stood at the window, calm, composed, but still. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, she turned to them. I didn't want to use it, she said quietly, because if I do, there's no going back. Rachel tilted her head. Use what? Miriam walked to the drawer, opened a locked case, and pulled out a sealed file. Inside, a USB drive. Red-stickered, labeled in her handwriting, seal breaker, T923, judicial review. Tape. David looked at her, puzzled. What is that? She met. His eyes. It's the moment a sitting police commissioner confessed in private chambers on tape. He admitted he covered for 6 officers accused of murder. It was supposed to be sealed. It never aired in court. Until now, Rourke blinked. Why didn't you use it before? Because it would cost me everything. They'll claim I violated procedure, that I breached chamber protocols. I'll lose my license, my legacy. But you'll win the truth. David said. She nodded. And that's the only thing that matters. That night in her private journal, Miriam wrote, they struck my voice. They struck my son. They struck my allies. Now I will strike with the one thing they cannot silence, their own confession. There was no opening statement. There was no speech. There was only silence as Miriam Easton walked into the courtroom one last time. This was no longer about motions or testimony. It wasn't about the political fallout or media spin. What remained now was pure. One woman, standing in the heart of a broken system, asking it to face its own reflection. The gallery was beyond packed. People lined the walls. Reporters sat with notepads half full, not writing. Even they knew they might never witness something like this again. Judge Trammell had aged in the past week. Dark circles under his eyes, his usually upright posture slightly slouched. He nodded at Easton, not with approval but recognition. She stepped forward, calm, composed, terrifying in her stillness. "I present Exhibit T923, she said. Rachel handed over the red-sealed drive. Previously sealed under Rule 49E, taken. During an ethics review, off record but on tape. It contains an on-camera, on-audio confession by then-Commissioner Alden Briggs regarding criminal misconduct, intentional case burial, and systemic abuse directives." Trammell raised a brow. "And you understand what airing this could cost you?" Easton nodded. "My license, my reputation, possibly my freedom." She paused, then added, "But not my silence, that's already gone." He signaled the clerk. The lights dimmed, and the screen came to life. The footage was raw, no courtroom, just a private chamber. Briggs sat stiffly, older than people remembered him, but his smirk was unmistakable. "You want me to say it? Fine. I let it happen. I made it happen. You think I didn't know what my officers were doing out there? I trained half of them myself. You don't get promoted in this city for playing. Unfair. You get promoted for keeping heat off the mayor." He chuckled. "You think cops lie? Try sitting in on a city budget meeting." He sipped water. His fingers twitched. They didn't want justice, Miriam. They wanted optics. Arrests, numbers, sweeps, raids. They wanted Southside to stay scared and downtown to feel safe. That's the blueprint. That's always been the blueprint. Then Easton's voice came in, quiet but razor-sharp. "Do you admit you suppressed internal investigations?" Briggs leaned back. "Yes." "Do you admit evidence was altered?" "Yes." "Do you admit that at least 2 officers you cleared later killed unarmed civilians?" Briggs hesitated, then said it. "Yes." Then leaned forward and added, "And no one's going to do anything about it, because people like me keep cities functioning. People like you stir the pot until someone throws you out of the kitchen." The screen cut to black. The silence in the courtroom was unbearable. You could hear someone sobbing in the 3rd row. David Easton stood slowly, face unreadable. Rourke didn't move. He just whispered, "Well, damn." Trammell looked like someone had slapped him. One of the city attorneys stood up, panic in his eyes. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss the admissibility. This tape was sealed. This is—" Trammell raised a hand. His voice cracked as he said, "Motion denied. Proceed." Easton returned to the front. No expression, no smile, just wait. "This tape was never meant to see light," she said. "I followed the rules. I respected the system. I hoped it would correct itself." She looked to the gallery. "But rules mean nothing in a house built on silence." She turned to Judge Trammell, to the court, to everyone watching. "This isn't about one commissioner. It's not about one cop, one slap, one courtroom. It's about every file that vanished, every voice that broke, every child buried beneath a footnote." She took a slow breath. "They called me dangerous." She looked up, eyes clear as fire. "I am." The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. It stood, one by one, silently. People rose to their feet. Victims, lawyers, journalists, even Judge Trammell, slowly out of some deep instinct. And in that moment, no ruling needed to be read, because the truth had already landed. Hard. In the following days, Alden Briggs was placed under federal indictment. A DOJ task force was activated to audit Ambridge's police, prosecution, and civil case systems. 3. Sitting council members resigned. A sealed investigation into Mayor Hayes reopened. 23 officers were placed on unpaid leave. The term Eastern Protocol became shorthand across the country for public-led judicial accountability. Eastern herself never gave an interview. She didn't need to. Her silence now meant something different. It meant mission complete. 1 week later, Eastern packed up her apartment. David stood by the boxes, lifting one. "You sure you're done?" She smiled gently. "With the courtroom, yes." He raised an eyebrow. "And with justice?" She shook her head. "That work never ends." She handed him a small envelope. "What's this?" He opened it. Inside, a letter of recommendation. Addressed to Harvard Law School from Miriam Easton. David swallowed hard. "You really think I'm ready?" "No," she said, walking to the window. "But that's the point. None of us were. We just stood anyway." On her shelf, she left behind her last journal, the final page. They wrote policies in shadows. I answered in light. They screamed. "Respect authority," I whispered. "Earn it." And when they struck my name, I made it echo.